morning, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you, Tony, for your leadership and your very generous words of introduction. Let me thank John for the completion of his service and congratulate Harriet as she assumes the mantle later on today, or as we say in Brooklyn, Mazel Tov. But we look forward to her leadership and, of course, thankful for David and to Michael. And let me also shout out the AJC New York delegation, which I know is represented in a tremendous way. As was mentioned, I currently serve as the chair of the House Democratic Caucus. It's a great honor, but represent the 8th Congressional District in the United States Congress, parts of Brooklyn and Queens. The 8th Congressional District is one of the most diverse districts in the nation. In fact, 33% of the people I represent were born outside of the United States of America. We know traditionally people come from all over the world to places like Brooklyn and Queens to pursue the American dream. And so I have the great honor and privilege of representing African Americans, Caribbean Americans, Latinos, the Asian American community, the Orthodox Jewish community, the Reform Jewish community, Italian Americans, Irish Americans, and I'm still not done. Bangladeshi Americans, Turkish Americans, Pakistani Americans, and I'm quite proud of the fact, more Russian-speaking Jewish immigrants from the former Soviet Union than any other member of Congress in the country. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries, who knew? Only in America. And as was mentioned by Tony, I have the 9th most African-American district in the country and the 14th most Jewish. My friend, Leon Goldenberg, back home often reminds me, Hakeem, you've got the best of both worlds. And I agree wholeheartedly with that sentiment. And I'm proud of the fact that yesterday, with AJC's leadership, we are launching the Black and Jewish Caucus in the United States House of Representatives, and I will be a proud founding member of that effort. And we're thankful for that. We've stood together year after year, decade after decade, century into century. We will continue to stand together forever. And we're thankful for that. We do have challenging issues, of course, that we have to work through as a country. The rise of anti-Semitism, the rise of hatred, the rise of bigotry. A lot of work for us to do together. You know, in Brooklyn, we used to have a baseball team, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and of course there were the... I tell you, Brooklyn is always in the house. But you had the Brooklyn Dodgers. At the same time, you had, in the 40s into the 50s, of course, the New York Yankees and also the New York Giants at the time were playing in the Polo Grounds. And I had a law professor, my former dean, actually, John Sexton, who would often say to us that back then in New York City, you can sometimes tell your political affiliation based on who you rooted for as a baseball team. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you know, Brooklyn Dodgers, Pee Wee Reese and Jackie Robinson, they were kind of the underdogs often, and Sandy Koufax and so many others. You know, they tended to be Democrats in terms of your political affiliation if you were a Dodger fan. He said, the Yankees, you know, that was the establishment, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, the great Yankees, Yogi Berra, they tended to be Republicans. And I said, well, who were Giant fans? He said, well, those were undecided swing voters. But I just wanted to say that whether you are a Dodger fan, a Yankee fan, a Giant fan, we are all going to make sure we stand against the rise of anti-Semitism in this country, stand against bigotry, stand against hatred, and stand against the effort to try to delegitimize the state of Israel. It is important that we keep it a bipartisan issue, and I'm committed to that cause. And that's why I'm proud to join my colleagues, Ted Deutsch and Jerry Nadler and others, on a strong anti-BDS resolution, because we are recognizing BDS for what it is. An effort to try to delegitimize the state of Israel. We will not let it stand, and I will always rise up for the principle that Israel will remain a Jewish and democratic state. And we will stand with Israel today, stand with Israel tomorrow, and stand with Israel forever because of our shared values, our shared commitment, our shared democracy. I've had the opportunity to visit Israel on several occasions, 3 times. I've been, I'll go a 4th time in August with several members of the new freshman class on a trip that has been led for years by Steny Hoyer, and we're all looking forward to it. When I went to Israel the first time, I think the most profound conversation that I had was with a member of the IDF, senior leader, and I asked him just to sum up in the most appropriate way he thought he could the security challenges that confronted Israel. And I'll never forget it. He said, Hakeem, Israel lives in a tough neighborhood. And I thought it was an incisive and elegant description of the perilous situation that Israel confronts on a day-to-day basis. Hamas in Gaza, dangerous situation in the Sinai, Hezbollah to the north, chaos in Syria, Iraq still a mess, Iran with nuclear aspirations. You know, I grew up and came of age in central Brooklyn in the late 80s and early 90s. It was a tough neighborhood. I know from tough neighborhoods. And Israel lives in a tough neighborhood, and as I've often said publicly, in a tough neighborhood, at the end of the day, the only constant, the only thing that your neighbors will respect is strength. And that is why we're going to maintain our commitment to ensuring that Israel maintains its qualitative military edge and can remain strong and capable of defending itself in the same way that every other nation in the world has the right to defend itself. And we will stand by Israel when it exercises that right and ensure that they can continue to protect themselves in a defensive way as they have been doing with Iron Dome, David's Arrow, and David's Sling, and the secure defense systems that they have developed and will continue to develop as a result of this close partnership with the United States of America. We also, of course, need to address this poisonous rise of anti-Semitism that is taking shape in the United States and in Europe and increasingly in many parts of the world. And to do it with every single voice. It should not just fall on the Jewish community to stand up against anti-Semitism. Dr. King once said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And anti-Semitism, a great injustice, a poison, a cancer which must be stamped out and eradicated. And all of us bear the responsibility to join AJC in your leadership efforts to address this scourge. And I do it understanding the shared history as a people, African Americans and the Jewish community, with a particular reference to the district that I'm proud to represent, not just the diversity that I mentioned, but the history of it. We know that Dr. King in the 60s famously spoke up about the issue related to Soviet Jewry and the oppression that was taking place behind that Iron Curtain. And in the midst of him working through the issues around the civil rights movement to try to create equal protection under the law and liberty and justice for all, took the time out to use his voice to address the issue of oppression of Soviet Jews and the anti-Semitism that was underlying it. And now I have the opportunity to represent, as I mentioned, more Russian-speaking Jewish immigrants from that former Soviet Union, and I talk a lot about that trajectory and the intersection and the responsibility that I have to continue along the same path and the foundation that was laid by Dr. King. But then I also will mention the people that I represent in central Brooklyn and in Bedford-Stuyvesant and other parts, that I'm proud to represent parts of a district that used to be represented by a prominent Jewish congressman named Emanuel Seller. He served in Congress for 50 years. He was right next to Truman when the United States became the first nation to recognize the state of Israel. He was a prominent leader on issues of the U.S.-Israel relationship. I'm proud to stand on his shoulders and that legacy. But one of the things that's not known about Congressman Emanuel Seller, Manny Seller, as he was affectionately referred to in Brooklyn, is that as he was working through issues related to Israel or anti-Semitism and things of this nature, he was also, in the 1960s, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. And as the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, played an instrumental role in making sure that Congress passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Emanuel Seller stood with the African American community, just as Dr. King stood with the Jewish community. It's a great legacy, and I'm so thankful that members of the House of Representatives, with your leadership, at such a perilous time, recognize that legacy, recognize the importance of our communities standing together. We will denounce and stamp out the rise of hatred. We will denounce and stamp out the rise of anti-Semitism. We will denounce intolerance in any form. We will denounce accusations of dual loyalty. And we will stand together as one community, African Americans and Jews, as part of a great nation. And together we'll continue our long, necessary, and majestic march toward a more perfect union. So God bless you, God bless AJC, and God bless the United States of America.